So welcome everybody, and thanks a lot for joining. I'm Andy Murdock. I lead the Green Forest Hoverfly Hunt. We're essentially a team of people, though it's not just me. But most of us are sort of actively involved with the UK Hoverflies Facebook group or living locally to the forest. So yeah, this is the team. We're a team of about 20. And it includes my colleague Yanis from Maplume, who has done a lot of the cool stuff behind the scenes to support the work. So yeah, big team, but I'll be the one doing most of the talking. And I'm hoping that when the difficult questions in, my colleagues are going to chip in and help me out at the end. So let's get going then. And as I said, this session has been recorded. So if you don't want to be seen, please turn your camera off or and mute your microphones, and you won't be heard. But yeah, we're going to record it for people who can't make it. And if you want to ask a question, there's a little button down in the corner of your screen where you can post questions, and we can hopefully get to those at the end if there are any specific things people want to ask. So yeah, that's where we're at. So just a bit of background to start with. So we're talking about Caliprobola speciosa. It's also called Green Forest Hoverfly, which is what we've tended to use for the project, just to sort of encourage a bit more of wider engagement. But the names are still in a bit in flux. So it's also known as the orange wing hoverfly and jewel wood fly. But we're basically going to stick to calling it by its scientific name. So Caliprobola speciosa, it lives in ancient woodlands. It's very much tied to 2 locations in the UK only. So that's New Forest and Windsor Forest. And it's heavily dependent on these old beech stumps for its larval habitat. So this is where you would tend to look for it, places like this in the photo. And anecdotal evidence suggests that it's been not doing so well, but really there's not a huge amount of data available to support that. So, you know, the aim of this work has really been to try and generate new records for the species to see if we can get a better understanding of how it's doing. At the moment, there's about 100 records in the Hoverfly and Recording Scheme database and about another 50 on MBN, but they are, you know, some of those are unconfirmed. So yeah, the aim of this project really was to try and see if we could find out where it was, generate some records and get a better understanding of how it's doing, basically. And so in 2022, we set out after a suggestion from Roger Morris to go and have a look. And a team of 7 went out, did a lot of traipsing around the forest and only managed to turn up 1 record. And that was by Colin Easton, who found it, albeit at a new site, but we only managed to generate 1 despite many hours searching in the forest. And there were only another 4 records that year. So, you know, quite not disappointing, but it was a lot harder, I think, than we thought it was going to be. So we obviously wanted to come back again and do more this year. For those not familiar with it, this is our quarry. It's a large beast. It's a stunning hoverfly. It's got this sort of metallic black and golden sort of coloration. And it's got sort of really distinctive coloured wings, orange and brown wings, and bright orange legs. And it's kind of gilt-edged on the abdomen with these sort of golden bands of fur. And in flight, it's said to sort of emit an audible buzz. So, you know, fairly distinctive thing. One thing that we're all non-specialists largely. I think there's a couple of professional ecologists in the team, but mostly we're all, you know, enthusiastic amateurs. So yeah, this is what we've been looking for. And like many hoverflies, the female and the male are distinguishable by having eyes that differ. So the female's eyes separated and the male's joined together. So that's a useful indicator. And so yeah, we got Tony produced this graphic for us, which was quite helpful during the work, because most of them had never seen the thing before, so it was very useful. In terms of the records, as I said, it's confined to New Forest and Windsor Forest only. There's some as what Stubbs Folk call tantalizing records from elsewhere, but they're really only singleton records and a bit of an anomaly, and perhaps talk about that in a bit more later on. But generally, it's confined to these two locations. And back in 2014, it was rated as near threat and lower risk in the Ball and Morris study, which is kind of what started the conversation that they didn't really have enough data to be confident in how it was doing, and that's what led to this work. And in terms of the flight period, it's really on the wing from May to the end of June. So early May to the end of June is the kind of the main period, and so it's quite a short window to find it really. And so obviously we targeted our effort around that time. Across Europe as a whole, it's kind of a bit more numerous on the continent, mainly in France, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, and up into Denmark in the north, and then across to as far as Azerbaijan in the east. So that's the current status in Europe, and it's assessed as being of least concern. But again, they indicate in the studies in the recent review for the red list of threatened species, they suggested that more work was needed on this species. And oops. And yeah, and in terms of the early stages, again, some things are known about it. It's a rat-tailed maggot type larvae. It's found in the decaying stumps of these trees. So the reason it's associated with the beech trees and these old rotten stumps is that the larvae are living in the roots, basically deep down in this sort of porridge-like environment. And it has been successfully reared in Europe, but from oak. So in Europe, it tends to seems to be using oak as well as beech, but in the UK, it tends to be just beeches for some reason, which is interesting. So in terms of methodology, as I say, the team of 7 of us, although we traipsed across the forest and didn't have much success in finding Caliprobola speciosa, we did manage to find quite a lot of suitable habitat. So we recorded and GPS tagged various tree locations and made notes so that we could revisit again in this year's survey. And we also reached out again to UK Hoverfly's Facebook group and the recording scheme, plus some local groups, Southampton Natural History Society and Wild New Forest, who provided us with additional volunteers. So, we wouldn't really have had such a good response this year without those additional people joining. So it was really good to get those additional people together and to engage with those groups. And then we also actually formalised the survey with the Forestry England and through British Entomology and Natural History Society managed to get the insurance so that supported that permit. So that was really useful in terms of getting netting licenses and so on. So in 2023, we had a team of 21, as I said, and basically lots of different people had different amounts of time to spare. So we had to design our survey approach to be kind of mindful of that. And so basically you could turn up and do one day and it was valuable. And as we'll see, it's been extremely valuable having people who, even though they've not been able to devote huge amounts of time, have had a big impact on the results and the survey. So the flexibility, I think, was one of the attractions of the surveys. People could go where they wanted, pretty much when they wanted, and weren't necessarily told where to go. Although we were encouraging people to go to different sites, and we used a mapping system to help us coordinate where to go. So, as I said, I'm a mapping professional by background, and my company Mapling basically provided a configuration of our existing tools to guide the surveyors. So there was a platform, had a load of layers in, which you can see on the left-hand side. And basically we had things like the Forestry England ancient and ornamental woodland areas and various other things like terrain. We had past records from MBN and this recording scheme. And then we also did some work on LiDAR, looking at the tree cover and trying to work out whether we could find areas of more open woodland. So obviously hoverflies like sunnier locations. We got the feeling from last year's survey that we would have more success in more sunny open areas. as opposed to tree stumps in shaded areas. So we were trying to use that within our sort of targeting. So the layer was available, but it was up to people whether they chose to look at those in more detail. But what we did do from those was take that information plus things like the ancient tree inventory and start to target individual squares and to try to build up this prioritization for the study. So the aim was to flag individual squares to see how likely they were to have Caliprobola speciosa in them, and we did that and created a ranking based on whether there was existing records, whether it was whether there were existing trees that we could identify from previous surveys that we wanted to revisit, and then we also used combinations of the ancient woodland polygons and the ancient tree inventory to work out where there was dead oak and beech that might support the species from their other data. Because obviously, looking for areas of woodland, suitable area of woodlands without any sort of guide is a massively time-consuming job. And we found that last year that we covered lots of ground, and there's still large areas of the forest that we just hadn't looked at. So we're trying to use these data sets to guide us to help us to work out where the best place to go was. So that gave us the prioritization, but we also relied heavily on local knowledge. So this was really where people like the Southampton Natural History Society and Wildlife Forest volunteers came in, because they had really good local knowledge of the forest already, and were able to put that to good use to identify areas we hadn't thought of or maybe were missed by the data sets. The other good thing about the platform was that we were able to then take the last year's information and plot it in the system to be able to show the locations of specific trees we wanted to go to, but also to show information about those trees, including photos. So you knew you'd got to the right tree because you could see a picture of it, and there was various other bits of notes. This was done in a rather manual way. I was having to sort of update this on the fly each evening to keep track of the number of visits and number of males and females and so on. So this isn't perfect by any means, but it gave us a good indication of where we might how we might guide people to specific trees to go and survey. And then obviously in the field, that map also worked on the mobile. So it wasn't optimized fully, but you could see your location on the map relative to the trees that you were trying to get to. So it would help you sort of guide. But people used other tools as well if they had the coordinates. So it was really nice to be able to use GPS to sort of locate these trees. The surveys themselves were pretty straightforward, searching whole grid squares, looking for hoverflies in general. If there was specific trees identified, we did what we call stump vigils, where we stood there and waited and looked and hopefully saw it appear. But we had various people out looking at any one time in the forest, and it was a good way to point people to likely locations. And then also there was additional scoping, so people were also providing information which allowed me to update those tree locations and suitable sites on the map, so that we could continue to update that and to share that with others, so everyone had access to the map during the survey. And then we also use WhatsApp to help coordinate what we were doing. So as people had sightings, we could check IDs, we could share where we were going, where we'd been, and then I tried to update that on the map to show progress and to show where people had gone. So over time, we turned filled in these different squares with different colours and the positions of suitable trees and so on. But then we also adapted en route as well. So as we developed the survey, we continued to improve and to focus on where we thought we might have the most success. So in terms of results, we had our first record, which came from outside the team in the end. It was from on the 15th of May, and it was from a colleague of Steve. I can't remember his surname. Anyway, it was one of our colleagues, and he he got a message from someone who's aware of the survey, and she basically provided this photo of one at Hawthorne, a female at Hawthorne, in a really unlikely spot. It was along the path of like a track, a woodland track, and in a not particularly suitable looking area. But what it did say was that it was obviously on the wing, and so it kind of gave us a bit of impetus to go out and look. And Colin managed to locate one. Colin Easton managed to locate one at Brinkham Wood, where he'd seen one previous year on the 15th as well. And then that really kicked off the whole thing. So we knew it was on the wing. We went to some of our target trees, and again, at a site that Claire Seymour had found after a recce, after the visit to the pub when we all had our kickoff meeting. You know, she found these trees a month earlier. I went and managed to find one, and then another close by, and that really sort of kicked it off. So those were near Lyndhurst and in the New Forest, and but the beauty of that was that they were quite easy to go and see then. So several people went and saw them and got their eye in, and in doing so, they added additional numbers. So, you know, while I'd only seen one, people went back the same day and saw, you know, several, 3 or 4, and males and females. So it was really useful to go back, not only to sort of get an appreciation of those species, but also to get their eyes in for what the species look like. And so we spent the next few weeks searching around, and we refound it at many of the sites that were initially suggested. And then we also found it at many of the target trees that we'd identified in previous years. So that was really good. But then after that, we started to push outwards as well. So we're trying to push the extent. So northwards, we did a lot of effort in the northern area, north of the A31, and again, Colin got the first record of Caliprobola speciosa north of the A31, the first confirmed record anyway. And then we also looked to the east and west and tried to fill in the gaps, basically. So we spent a considerable amount of time trying to do that, and you know, we did pretty well overall, I think. And the map shows that we've got a map here showing that all of the records from MBN and the Hoverfly recording scheme in as dots. And then all of the red squares, the deep red is where we had success. So we visited all of the pale red, pink squares, the pale red squares, and then the red ones were where we had actually successfully located the Caliprobola speciosa during the survey. And in total, that added up to 30 new 1 km squares added to the distribution. So pretty good stuff, really. We were really chuffed. And you can see from the distribution, you've got these kind of 2 distinct bands that kind of track across the forest. We've got one that kind of goes across the middle here, and then another one that goes kind of north across the north. And what we were trying to do in the last part of the surveys was try and fill these in, but basically on the principle that, you know, that they were functionally connected in sort of landscape ecological terms. So the idea that, you know, there's a potential to move across a continuous habitat, essentially. And so one of the reasons for that is obviously the extent of the ancient woodland seemed to come out as quite a good mirror of that pattern. And so this is the Forestry England's ancient woodland polygons overlaid with our locations in red. And you can see there's a pretty close match. And so frustratingly, we were pushing in for these other sites in the east. And I know Paul Stevens spent a lot of time here. Colin was sort of obsessing on this bit at the top, really, trying to find it. And I spent a lot of time down here on the river, on the Bewley River, but we still didn't manage to get those areas filled in. So we think that probably within the ancient woodland area, there's probably more to be found, but for now, that's the current extent. And obviously, you know, I was having to populate these manually and keep track of all the numbers. And what we've seen from sort of recent news events is that it's really useful to have a historic record in WhatsApp of what's been said and done. And so we had this WhatsApp group going with loads and loads of messaging backwards and forwards, and you know, posting all sorts of things. It was really great resource to go back and get the information from. So I've harvested that and all of the emails and the various other things just to cross-check. We've got loads of information in here that still can be reported, birds and other insects and things. So we're going to sort of do some more work on that. But in terms of the numbers for Caliprobola speciosa, we did much better than expected. So in total, we've had 108 unique records. So if you think about, there was only 100 in the Hoverfly recording scheme database before that. That's a pretty good start. 7 of those came from outside the team, just people who were aware of the project and shared their data, and people that we'd been in touch with before, which was great. And that included 1 record from outside the New Forest at the Windsor Forest site from Paul Brock, and he had permissions to access private land to do ecological surveys there, and managed to turn one up during the period. So that was great to see as well. So that gave us what we estimate to be a total of about 94 individuals, mostly males. You know, the vast majority that we saw were males, 7 females, and then 5 that we didn't determine to gender. And our flight period, including all the records, so for those from outside the team, we had from 13th of May to the 19th of June. So really, really interesting, and yeah, it just shows that sort of narrow window of opportunity, really. One of the advantages of growing the team was that we pulled in some excellent photographers. We already had some great photographers, not myself included, but we had you know, these amazing photographers who took brilliant shots. And if you go on the website, there's several of these, and you can see some of the behavioural stuff. We were getting sufficient numbers to start to sort of really see what was going on and how this species behaves. So one of the things we noticed about the males pretty quickly was it's flying with its legs dangling. You know, the guys talk about sort of wasp-like, but this is really what we're talking about here, sort of flying with dangling legs. I talk about expert photographers. I don't think Tony's going to forgive me for showing this one, but it kind of just shows you the sort of wasp-like at a glance. You know, what it's trying to do, trying to mimic the what a wasp looks like for protection, presumably. And so he posted that on the WhatsApp group, and I just thought that was brilliant, so I included it. So apologies, Tony, that's no slight on your photograph ability. Then we had several territorial males fighting as well, so this was it was interesting stuff. I think we also have a couple of videos. Whether these will work, I'm hoping they will. Oh, you've even got sound. So this is one I took at one of the trees near Lyndhurst of a male just sort of hovering around and being at the tree there. And then we have, I'd have to come out of this. And then we had another one which was extremely obliging, which was taken by Steve Laycock. His name was, sorry, I forgot his name. But, this is amazing showing off by a male here, but this is sort of fairly typical fly behaviour. But you can really get a feel for the thing from the sort of video there. And those pictures are all on the so those videos are all on the website. We also saw a couple of occasions of mating happening, but females were, as I say, were a lot harder to come across. You know, we only saw, I think it was 7, but at least one of those was seen entering the ground to lay eggs and stuff. So that was good that we actually sort of kind of saw some of that behaviour. And so in terms of the sites where we were finding it, you know, it's very much these old beech stumps, you know, well rotted. You know, we only had one record that wasn't on a beech stump, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We only had one flower visit record, and that wasn't actively feeding at the time from that external record. But you know, the idea is that the best places to look are sort of well rotted stumps of old and veteran beech trees with plenty of debris around the base. And where the roots are accessible, essentially, is what we think. And you know, there's a difference between trees that have snapped off with the trunk still in the ground, and those which have fallen over through waterlogged ground and wind blow, where the root plate is still attached. They seem to be less suitable. We didn't find anything on sites that didn't really have, on trees that didn't really have that sort of stump sticking out of the ground. So that was good. And even if it was just a tiny amount of stump sticking out of the ground, it seemed to make a difference. And I think there's a photo from earlier where people are looking at the ground. It was a little, it's only about 1/2 meter tall, but or a meter tall, and you know, that was posting it. And then generally there's some sort of surrounding vegetation present, so bracken and so forth. And so the sort of typical situation is this. You know, this was a big one that was seen lots of times with the fly around here. This was a well rotted one again near Lyndhurst, which we'd identified from a previous year, and lo and behold, it turns up. And you can all see that there's little bits of vegetation to provide a bit of variety and sun and things elsewhere, but nearby. Now the oak record, which Mike can probably tell you more about later, but essentially that was an anomaly. We only had that single record at oak, and it was on this tree. This one actually does look a bit more windblown than others, but there was roots still in the ground. But that was the only record we managed to have by Mike and Jan, and that was nice to see, because, as I say, on the continent it's much more common to be on oak, and for reasons we'll cover later, that's quite important. And clearly the sort of time of day made a difference. So we had a field trip latterly in the survey where several of us went out, and this was a tree that Mark Welfare found. He came down from Northumberland and managed on one day to find a tree with a Caliprobola. And so the thing about this one was, though, that it was only in sunlight for a certain period, but when it was in sun, it kind of it popped up and showed its head, and that led us to sort of wonder about this sort of relationship with temperature and microclimate. And I think Tony's pictured here with a digital thermometer, who was starting to explore that a little bit, but that's something that we might pick up for next year. But clearly it doesn't need to necessarily be in full sun all day, as long as there's a period where it can be in sun. And obviously these are all sort of things that need to be tested, but it seems fairly sensible for why it would suddenly appear at certain times of day and then be absent at others. And obviously related to that, we've got issues of habitat management. So you know, one of the things was we had some amazing stumps, but they were crowded out by overgrown holly or bracken, and clearly, you know, by clearing some of that away, you create and expose these areas for potentially great habitat in the future. So one of the things that we wanted to do was talk with Forestry England about that and their current habitat management, and so hopefully we'll get the opportunity to do that. But it also includes things like if you replant a tree where one's died, you don't plant it on the southern side where it's shading. And we saw some examples of that, which obviously we would suggest it go around at least to the north, but or somewhere else, to avoid shading the stump and making it less suitable. So just wanted to pick up on a couple of other of the hovers that we saw, because these are fairly typical of the habitat as well. You've got Chalcosurface nemorum. That's fairly common for us. I think most of us saw that. Brachypalpus lafriformis, again, several people saw that, as well as Microdon analis. This is the one that has the amazing larvae that look like tanks that go after ant colonies of, I think it's Lasius niger they target, but in the tree stumps and under the bark of trees. So these were kind of commonly found. And then this year, for the first time, for me anyway, I saw Crearina berberina, which is one that mimics different types of bees. So there's a dark form which looks like tree bumblebee, and then a lighter form which looks like what's it, carder bee, as does this one, similarly Flucosa, which is related, but they're both sort of tree or sort of woodland bees, woodland hoverflies. So we found those, which was nice. And then the other one that you might like to come across, you can just about see it giving vibes of some sort of Star Wars landing pad. There's a little tiny thing up here, and this is Pocota personata, and it's quite difficult to see. So fortunately, I had a 100 times on lens on my phone to manage to get this terrible shot. Others were much more lucky than I was, and got much better and much closer views. But you can see what a stunning beast that is. Very, very bee-like, and typical of these sort of rot holes in beach, where it sort of lays its eggs. And then we also saw a few other very cool things. So Paul was lucky enough to see Solota anthracina, and you know, that is an extremely rare one. We had Claire Seymour had a day trip to the forest from where she lives. I managed to turn this up. Denny Wood, which is Melota simpiciformis, which is again another rare one. And then, unbeknownst to me at the time, I thought I was looking at a Kylosia, but I didn't manage to get hold of it before it escaped when I was trying to get it out of the tube. But fortunately, the Facebook group and Chris Sellen saved the day. So this was Myolepta dubia, which again was a completely new one to me and is quite unusual. So that was really good to see. And in total, we had 41 species. So that's nearly, well, over double what we had last year in terms of species. So that was really encouraging. And I think probably if we strayed a bit more outside of the sort of woodland extent, and you know, went to some of the marshy bits and elsewhere, we'd probably turn up a lot more across the forest and have a better understanding of what else is there. So just in conclusion, I guess we're quite happy that Caliprobola speciosa is more widespread and numerous than we previously thought. It's probably under-recorded though, as we've shown. If you go out and look in these different places in suitable habitat, it's likely to be found. So you know, we want to try and repeat our work and see if we can turn it up at the same locations next year, and if we can find it in other locations. But it does seem to be part of this larger assemblage of insects and fungi that rely on these decaying beaches. And Russell Wynn, one of our team, who's used to be a professor of ecology, he's sort of big into fungi and had spotted the sort of relationship between the distributions of rare fungi species and certain beetles and so on with the pattern of the distribution that we've managed to find with this species this year. So it's clearly important to a whole range of things, but we expected to find it at lots of other sites as well, and we were not really sure why we couldn't. And so that's something that we want to look at again. And you know, is it there and we just were unlucky? Is there some other reason for it? Because there's plenty of suitable habitat in the ancient woodland. You know, there's lots of dead and decaying trees. There's lots of recent falls of some massive trees, which, you know, could see a good supply of timber for the years, for years to come, and that's really positive. But you know, longer term, the replacement of these trees is a lot less certain, because we've got a large amount of grazing in the forest, and then we also have this sort of spectre of climate change. There was a paper published, I think it was a couple of years ago or maybe last year, which is looking at you know, the northward shift of the beech trees into the north of the country, and the south of England. Effectively, it could be extinct within 150 years, beech woodland, which obviously, if there's no alternative sites for Caliprobola speciosa to move to, and it's not using oak, then it could be in trouble. So it's quite an interesting area to try and explore a bit further, because there isn't really any obvious areas of substantial size for it to move to. So we need more data, and obviously we're going to try and do more in 2024, but hopefully the work that we've done so far has added quite a lot of value to the picture of how Caliprobola speciosa is doing at the moment. And I think in total our team generated over 1,100 hours of volunteer time, which is tens of £1,000s of consultancy if you were to go out commercially. So hopefully that's a good thing. And and so obviously we've got some ideas for next year. We're obviously going to share our findings with Forestry England, because you know, it's their land and they're managing it, and they were really encouraging about when we shared the report. They were very positive about it, and we've got a meeting with them to talk about how we might do some experiments with holly management in the northern bit of the forest. So that would be really good to see if that has any impact on numbers. But there's lots of things. We obviously want to see if we can find it in new sites. I'd like to get into Windsor Forest if we could, but a lot of that's private at the moment. But there's potential to do more there to build on Paul's recent record. We can do a lot more to understand, what are the characteristics of these stumps and why they're, why certain stumps are better than others, and to actually try and do something statistical around that by taking measurements and so on. And some people have been doing some work this winter on that for other projects, which is very relevant. But also, we can make the data recording a lot easier. As I said, I spent quite a long time entering data in, but I think Yanis and I were already saying that we can do stuff to help surveyors do that themselves. So it'd be brilliant if we could do that, to make that process a lot more efficient. We've also talked about mark release recapture studies, because we don't necessarily know where these individuals go to. That generally we see the males are holding territory on a stump, but we don't know if they get knocked off that stump by other males. We don't know how far they travel to get to those stumps. So there's a suggestion that we could do some mark release recapture work to look at movement, which would be really interesting. And as a geographer, obviously I'm going to stick my hand up for that one. And then I was on the phone today with the Natural History Museum in London, talking about getting a full genetic sequence for Caliprobola speciosa, which obviously requires taking a specimen, but then also having that as part of that, it's barcoded, which allows you to do comparisons with other populations. So if we did want to explore this idea of a potential risk of it being on the edge of its range and in the genetic bottleneck, if the population isn't big enough, then that would be some good evidence to form the basis of that work. And then finally, the potential to do work around larvae. We know that we know where these sites are now. We have a good chance of finding larvae if we went looking for them potentially, and to build on the work of Rotheray and Desai, who managed to raise it previously, and maybe if it is in trouble in the future, if there's potential for conservation through hoverfly lagoons like they did with the pine hoverfly, which would be great. So yeah, lots of ideas. Obviously we can't do everything, so we're going to talk with Forestry Commission and see what their interests are, and the holly management seems an obvious one. But yeah, we'll have to see what the appetite is, and how practical the other things are. So with that, just a quick set of thank yous. Obviously, the big thank you goes to the team. Without all the people out surveying, it wouldn't have been possible to kind of do this work. We've generated a large number of records, and it's only because a lot of people have spent a lot of time on the ground in the forest. And to be fair, a lot of them probably knowing there was little chance of success at some of the places they got sent to, but I think overall, I think everybody did see it in the end, which is fantastic. And so we're very grateful to everyone on that list there, and to Yanis, my colleague, for the mapping, but also to the other contributors from outside the team, and then obviously to our experts, to Roger, to the European colleagues, Wout and Frank, and to local people like Paul Brock and George Else, who've provided guidance. So it's been excellent. And also, we've had a lot of support from the Hoverfly Recording Scheme through the identification of UK hoverflies and these various other groups. So yeah, just a big thank you to them as well. So with that, I am going to stop and ask if there are any questions.
Okay, Andy, can I just start on behalf of everyone and say thank you very much indeed for what I think was an excellent presentation. I think it's quite inspirational. So well done to you, and well done to everyone else. I mean, it's amazing, and I very much hope that it will encourage other groups to develop similar ideas, maybe looking at other species. Absolutely brilliant. I'm very much hoping that maybe you'll come to Prague this next summer and present the results there, and maybe get some of our European colleagues interested in doing something similar. We really do need to get more people interested in ecology rather than just let's go and create a spot on a map. And I think this is an absolute exemplar of doing that, exactly that. So well done.
Thanks a lot, Roger. Yeah, no, really appreciate that, and again, thanks for your help. It's been really good to have your input. I should have said, sorry. Does anyone from the team want to say anything about their experience of the work or any aspect of it? I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't feel comfortable talking, but just if anyone does want to say anything, I'd like to give you the opportunity to chip in.
Robin's
got his hand up. Go for it.
Well, first of all, the mapping, the app on the phone just worked superbly well. I'd like to say that it was even in areas where I couldn't really get a phone signal, it was perfect. So that was just superb. Just one tiny point that I thought of in terms of collecting data next year. You mentioned aspect of the stumps, and most of them I assume were south, or somewhere between southeast and southwest. And I just wondered, how far can we go away from the ideal aspect and still find hobbits? Is there some scope for investigating that? And also perhaps the substrate at the stump, perhaps investigate, is it rotting roots? Is it rotting hardwood? Is there bark? Is there leaf litter, bare sand, bare soil? So perhaps that's, in terms of physical data rather than actual sightings, is that something that perhaps we could investigate while we're waiting for the wretched thing to appear?
Yeah, very much so, and thanks very much. I'll pass on to Yanis probably the comment about the mapping. He's probably more instrumental than I am, but thanks for that. But yeah, in terms of the orientation and things like that, I think the orientation would fit in with that wider piece about characterizing the stumps. So what is it about these stumps? What are their environs? What is adjacent? Can we have a checklist of things? Sorry, Mike, did you want to come in there? I thought you were raising your hand.
Yeah, just briefly on a couple of things. First of all, to echo what Roger was saying about the quality of the survey. I mean, Jan and I have participated in a number of surveys over the years, and I think we both agree that this is one of the best we've ever participated in terms of its organisation, its objectives, and the method of recording. I don't think we've ever come out of at the end of a survey thinking we've been so involved in participating and achieving some results. So we're definitely going to be back next year.
That's great.
If we've got stuff to do, as it were. But one of the things that I think fascinated us was when we saw a number of individuals. I think we saw 5 individuals, 4 males and a female. They were on individual windblown stumps under heavy shade, and it seemed to us, we've got no way of telling, but it seemed to us that they were on distribution from where the sort of birthing stumps were, and were now making their way off. There seemed to be no other explanation for it. They certainly weren't mating, they weren't egg laying, but they were still attracted to these windblown stumps under heavy shade. And they were moving through the forest, as it were. So that it may be that we may need to think about some way of of tracking how they move, once they emerge.
Yeah, well, personally, just thanks again for getting involved. It's been brilliant to have you all, and especially with your local knowledge. Again, it's just been massively useful to have you both there, and everyone else, obviously. But yeah, in terms of the point about dispersal, I think this is where this mark release recapture thing would be really interesting, because we could be almost getting them as they emerge. I think a few of us felt, and especially because Colin and others managed to find those ones so soon, so early in the period, it was really great because we were able to get onto them very, very quickly. We were able to go to sites and have a really good chance of success. And I think we felt that some of them had just emerged. The way they were behaving, they were very sort of sluggish and just kind of doing a lot of sort of preening and whatnot. So yeah, if we could get them there and then see how they're dispersed, that might be really, really interesting. And it might also explain things like why that record, the first record on the hawthorn, was in a really odd place. Is it dispersing from the host tree? It's a really good point. And there's so many questions. I mean, that's just one of many, isn't it? But it's a real rich area, I think, for further work. Roger, presumably, I think you've got a paper, haven't you, on mark release recapture for hoverflies that we could perhaps draw or at least start to look at a methodology for how that might work.
Yeah, we did a lot of mark capture with Polystellar, which, I mean, if you're going to do mark release capture, it's got to be an animal that's big enough to put marks on without, well, you've got to be able to handle it. And there are risks with it. The one that we did with Polystellar, we did lose one or two individuals where we had the paint was a little bit too runny. I think it probably ran into the breathing system.
It's lost you then when I
I can put that. I think I've got that paper somewhere, so I can put it on the Facebook group for people to have a look at.
Yeah.
It's not very difficult. The only drawback was that when we did it, we had, I think I've got a box with now something in the order of 30 different Humbrol paints that we used, the sort of model Airfix paint.
Yeah.
And at the time, the local toy shop was closing down, so its Airfix paints were very, very much cheaper, and I bought all sorts. But we then had to use multiple colours because we went over, I don't know, I suppose 2 months or so. But it's doable.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth doing. The other thing that immediately comes to mind is that I don't think it will be impossible to encourage the Crown Estate to allow access to High Standing Hill and to other parts of Windsor Great Park. I think with what you've done, if we would send, your report to the Crown Estate, I think we could convince them that there was a place for a volunteer group to take that interest. The problem I see with it is that, you guys are 60 miles away from Windsor.
Well, we have some local people.
Yeah, we need to get some local people, and there will be people, but we do need to get some more people who would
Martin's.
Oh well, is Martin local?
Yes.
Right. Well, you've just.
I'm only 5 miles away.
I think you've self-elected.
I think that's what we need. We need a local enthusiast that can take some of the experience that you guys in the New Forest have got and form a local group.
Mm.
And that would be fantastic. I mean, I think we need a New Forest group. Oh, sorry, a Windsor Forest group, because as with the New Forest, very, very few people visit Windsor Great Park. And there have been little peaks of considerable activity over the last 50, 60, 80 years. But we could actually do with a group that's actually really interested in, monitoring some of the interesting things. And that's not just hoverflies. I mean, there are all sorts of interesting beetles as well. So, you know, if Martin, you were interested in convening something similar, or maybe developing a Windsor Great Park study group and some targets, that would be fantastic. I would be really keen to encourage exactly that sort of thing. I want to break hoverfly recording away from dots on maps and asking conservation questions. It seems to me that, you know, that's the thing that's going to encourage people to get involved and get some real interest out. So brilliant. Well done, Andy. And Martin, I'm looking to you.
I'm a bit inexperienced to be organising it, perhaps, but
We've got a good template. We can talk offline about that. But yeah, certainly it'd be great to get into Windsor Great Park. Just on the mark and recapture, my son has these Posca pens, which are paint pens. I noticed that Natural History Bookshop, is it? They're selling these for mark, release and recapture. So I think these are
Yeah, they probably do.
It's
Well,
very
I think
quick drying and many
you've got to
different
trial
colours.
it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Anyway, I'll see what they think.
We
But
put
it's certainly,
markings on the thorax, but you can equally put markings on the wings.
Yeah.
It's more a question of how you handle the animal, and the more robust animals you can actually be quite brutal. But you still have to be careful.
yeah. No, obviously, we don't want to do any harm. That's the
No,
main
absolutely. But
overall harm.
Caliprobola is big enough to take a marking on, or 2 or 3 markings for it. I'll try and find the paper, and oh, I know what I can do. I can give you a link to the issue of Dipterus Digest that
Okay.
had that paper in,
Okay, great.
and then everyone can access it. Dipterus Digest these days is now available online, free, after 2 years after it's been published.
Mm-hmm.
So I will dig that out. And I will do a post on the Facebook group, you know, when this is over.
Excellent. Thank you. Did anyone else from the team have anything, or is there any questions?
Well, Robin had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Again.
I was actually just saying hello to my wife who walked through the.
I think your hand's up still from earlier then.
It seems to have picked up on that, but okay, no.
How about Colin or Paul? Have we got anything for you? No. Okay. Oh. Paul, hi. I can't hear you, Paul. I think you're on mute. Sorry.
There we go. Only to say that you're quite right that there is an excitement in finding them, but for a lot of us, especially looking in the new areas, it took some patience to do stump vigils for hours and find another stump to sit there for hours and see maybe the odd very common hoverfly, but absolutely no sign of the of our target hoverfly. And I'm never quite sure whether that means, oh, it's good data just to say there's nothing there, or it's to say, well, there probably is something there, we just didn't find it. But I guess without going to those places and looking, we'll never know.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Yeah,
a
no.
question you were right that, you know, long hours of watching without success, it takes a bit of grit to stick at it.
I know. I think after last year, we were you and I especially were thinking of just camping out at Denny Wood for for the month just to make sure we saw the bloody thing, because we spent a lot of time, and you know, it is exhausting at times covering that terrain, especially later in the season when the bracken's up, and you know, yeah, I fell over numerous times. but no, it's a good point. But yeah, hopefully we got there in the end, eh?
We did.
Colin, over to you.
Yeah, just say how much I are looking forward to next year, having enjoyed this year. But there is so much more we can do. I think the focus this year was very much on where can we find it.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be a bit more scientific about how we go about it next year, because you want to know more things about the same as it when you're doing a butterfly transect. You want to know about cloud cover, sun, temperature. You want to know how much shade is around. There's a lot of things, because I think we'll find that there are good days to look and there are bad times to look. And
Yeah.
if we can get the data with a lot of our sightings and our non-sightings, this is where what Paul said, where it's important to know where you don't find it. What are the conditions when you don't find it? And so I think there's loads to do. I think we've just scratched, balancing on the tip of the iceberg, and we've got to climb.
Yeah, definitely. And the sorts of reports that you were sending in, where you were starting to pick some of those ideas up, by recording, locations, but also time of day, and then things you were sharing in the WhatsApp, and people started to share latterly was, this would be good maybe in the afternoon, and those sorts of things. If we could try to be a bit more scientific, but don't forget that we saw one last year, and you saw it, no one else did, and so I was just glad to see any. So then once we started seeing loads, it's like, hang on a minute, we could ask loads of questions here, but we weren't geared up for that. We were just literally trying to generate records. So I think it was probably better than we could have expected, but in terms of actually sort of, as you say, sort of statistical scientific data, we need to be a bit more prescriptive of what we collect and how we do it. The danger there, though, is that then it becomes less easy to kind of encourage people to it may not fit with people's volunteering plans, or their time commitments and things like that. And some of it will and some of it won't. But what we don't want it to become is too onerous that people don't contribute like they have done this year. It's a bit of a balance, I see, from an organizational point of view anyway.
We can have a talk offline about what capabilities you can add to the mapping tool, but if there's just sort of a single template that people say sun, wind, shade, boom, 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 just a set of buttons, push, done, then
and we already have that in Surfboard. What I'm hoping is that this mapping platform and Surfboard are kind of going to come together so that the benefits of both will be felt by both sets of users. But it's just, there's a lot to do in life, and there's only so many hours in the day. But I think it is exciting. I think there's lots of things that there's lots of potential here, and I am looking forward to the next year as well.
Yeah.
So, has anybody got anything else before I wrap up? We're about at the top of the hour. Roger.
Can I just raise a couple of things, Andy? The first one that really strikes me is that you've done immensely well having 20 odd people out there, but it also seems to me that maybe there's a chance to draw in a few more. I think it'd be really helpful to do a few posts over the winter, posing questions to the Facebook group, because we've got people in the group who are, there's all sorts of scientists there. People like Bill Amos, who's professor of genetics at Cambridge. There are other people that, with tremendous academic experience, and they might be able to shed some insight on what one might do simply. And I take Colin's point. I don't think you have to go for anything too complicated.
Yeah.
You certainly don't want to do anything complicated to start with, because you've got to find your feet.
Yeah.
And the way I would look at the whole of this is an iterative process. At the end of which you might well be asking questions. Say, actually, what we need is a funded study. Maybe what we need is a funded study of Caliprobola in the UK, and maybe do something with our continental friends, which would be absolutely terrific. I think we could. You can lead the way in all sorts of ways. So slowly, pick up a few things, run with them, see if they work. Try to get more people involved. The more people get involved, then the more you can do and build up from there. And really spread the message on the Facebook group. You know, this is something that's been done in the New Forest. There are lots of other places where there are lots of other species that need that sort of approach. And it's a really great way of engaging society with, you know, active conservation. Fantastic. I'll shut up at that point and say thank you very much indeed, Andy, for a brilliant presentation. And thanks ever so much to everyone in the group that has made it possible. I think, you know, it's fantastic. So well done, everyone.
Yeah, good team effort. Thanks, everybody. So, so yeah, just before we go, sorry, did Tony want to say something there? He's had his hand up, but it might have just been an accident. Gone down again.
A very trivial observation on the back of the dangling legs thing that you were making fun of earlier. That I couldn't see why that would be a mimic or behavioural thing which would have any use, because in this country there aren't other dangerous predator type insects or venomous insects which look like that. But I when I went over to France to see my my brother and sister, I realized that there commonly you get lots of you get wasp species which look very much, although the color's wrong, but they look very much and behave very much with this dangling legs like the hoverfly. And it hadn't occurred to me, because they may not exist here, but they're a common species abroad. And in fact, my wife and I are both jet lagged. We just come back from New Zealand, where we've been for a while. And I noticed an introduced species there is exactly this long-legged dangling-legged wasp. And that reminded me, yes, of course, that looks like the hoverfly. It looks like the forest green hoverfly. So maybe that's why they adopt that kind of behavior. But maybe it's nothing more than the fact they've got rather long legs. But that begs the question of why on earth do they have such long legs? Anyway, I'll leave you with that and go back to my jet-lagged state.
Well, on that note, yeah, I'll just say thanks again. We will be having another planning meeting for next year. We could have that sooner rather than later. I don't know. Let's take that one offline, but we'll post about it. And yeah, hopefully we can do it in a pub in the New Forest like we did again. I think that was, for me, was a really nice thing as well. Before I sort of got involved with UK Hoverflies, I didn't really know any of this community. And the fact that we've been keeping in touch and had a couple of socials, and again, thanks to Colin for hosting us for the wrap-up event. You know, that was amazing, lovely day at the end of the season just to chat about what we'd found. It was really good. But from my perspective, that sort of community aspect's been really, really nice, and I've learned a lot from, you know, especially Paul and Colin and others, you know, over the last couple of years. It's been really, really useful. So yeah, a big thank you from me. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording, and then I will wish you all a good night.